When it comes to the future of the New Orleans Saints, Jeff Duncan and I had so much to talk about, we turned this into the first ever two-part Black and Gold Today. And part two is coming up next. Welcome to the Black and Gold Today, sponsored by Cadillac of New Orleans. I'm Jim Derry. On Monday's show, NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune columnist Jeff Duncan and I discussed his open letter to Tom Benson, asking the longtime Saints owner to sell both his NFL franchise and the NBA's Pelicans. Here's a snippet of what you might have missed.
I think it's a worthy discussion topic, and that's all we're trying to do with the piece was put out into the public forum the future options that we may have with the Saints and Pelicans. Tom Benson's no secret. He's 88 years old. He's involved in what could be a protracted legal fight with his estranged heirs. To consider, maybe some other options, local ownership. I mentioned the Mannings involved because they've been mentioned with other franchises, especially the one in Nashville. I know a group of local investors that have interest in potentially buying the team and keeping it here. And I think that's the most important thing that people need to realize is this team's not going anywhere no matter who owns the team.
And we turn to Mr. Duncan to finish our conversation. And another thing that you and I had talked about offset and some friends, I had lots of questions. I had as much
you got more reaction than I did.
I had as much feedback about this as you have, especially it was at a gathering last night with some friends and people were talking about it. But one of the things I think that sticks in some people's craw, I guess, so to speak, is the word entitlement and whether the city is entitled to the Saints and how much the city actually, financially we don't own the Saints, but there's a lot of things that are involved when it comes to that sort of thing.
Well, look, the New Orleans Saints are as close to a publicly owned team as anybody in pro sports next to the Green Bay Packers. Right. They have a lease agreement with the state of Louisiana for the Superdome and for the Smoothie King Center that is unique in professional sports. It's a lot of public taxpayer money supports this team, and it's different than any other pro sports team in the NFL, and NBA. So I think there's a little more transparency that is involved with this team, especially considering how the hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money and support that's gone into these teams. The Saints don't pay a dime of lease on the Superdome. They get every bit of revenue that comes through there, and that's a great deal for the team, but I think it also comes with a little more, obligation to the taxpayers when you do that.
This city is one of those cities that doesn't like change. We talked about it in Monday's show a little bit. It's hard to fathom for lots of fans out there who are still living in 2009 that this team could have changed so much in just a short period of time. And they don't want to think about a new owner, they don't want to think about a new coach, and they certainly don't want to think about a new quarterback. But for this team to get back to anywhere close to a team that resembled the one from 5-6 years ago, lots of changes need to be made.
Well, look, I don't think it starts at quarterback. I mean, I think Drew Brees showed on Sunday.
I didn't mean it that way.
I know. You know what I mean? But there are people out there that believe he may be playing his last game on Sunday against the Falcons as a New Orleans Saints quarterback. I don't believe that at all, and I think he showed just how good he is at this stage of his career at 36 years old. I think you build around Drew Brees in this rebuilding plan, and I know there's a lot of speculation about Sean Payton, and I think a lot of it is justified because there are leaks coming from his camp for whatever reason, strategy-wise. But I don't think Sean Payton's going anywhere. I think he's going to be coaching here next year and for the foreseeable future. It would take a very unique and compelling situation to lure him away, and it's going to take somebody with a lot of money to do it.
You said something that jumped out at me as a journalist, as a sports writer, and I think that's what people don't understand. These leaks have to come from somewhere. They don't just appear magically.
Right.
They obviously have to be, they can only be coming from Sean Payton's camp. Why would he want to throw those things out there?
That's a great question. I think there's a couple of reasons possibly. One, he could be trying to leverage the Saints for potential more power going forward, maybe a more lucrative deal. Or more importantly, I think, and more likely, it's that he wants other teams to know he could be available for them to approach the Saints and maybe potentially work out a deal. And for all we know, and this is just me speculating, it could be something complicit with the Saints. maybe the Saints feel like it's time to move on. Maybe they're going to rebuild, and they don't want to pay a coach $8 million in their rebuilding plan, and so it's in both parties' best interest to part ways. That could be something that's going on behind the scenes. There's clearly some back channel activity going on for a reason.
But you look at situations where one coach has had so much power, it doesn't necessarily work. And so he's in a perfect situation for himself because he's going to be able to, I mean, if he leaves the Saints, wants to leave the Saints, he can go get, there are 15 other teams that would hire him in a heartbeat, or want to trade for him or whatever. But he's in a perfect situation here with the Saints to where if he wants to get power, he already has a ton of it with an 88-year-old owner, and things changing at the top. I mean, he's in a situation here where he probably could run things the way that he wants to, and I don't know if that's a good thing, but I mean.
No, you make a valid point. And look, the only reason I think Sean Payton would leave is if personally he feels like he just needs a new challenge. Professionally in his career, he's looking for a new challenge. Maybe 10 years is a long time. I mean, we heard Steve Spurrier earlier this year in South Carolina say the same thing when he stepped down at South Carolina. I don't think he's unhappy. I don't think anybody's unhappy with him. I think it would be more along the lines of, hey, let's go climb another mountain somewhere else. We've done such great work here, and maybe it's in the best interest of the organization to get compensation for me if they're going to start rebuilding.
Predictions: Drew Brees restructures.
Oh yeah, there's no question that's going to happen. The only question would be is if Drew Brees doesn't want to restructure, and I can't believe that. He's so embedded in the community, but certainly the Saints have to come to him, and I think they will very quickly.
Sean Payton gets an extension?
I don't know if he'll get an extension, but I do think he's going to have some conversations with Mickey Loomis and the board of directors out there, the executives, about his future here in the offseason.
If Sean Payton doesn't come back, does Drew Brees want to come back?
Oh yes, I think so. I think it's not as obviously as compelling for him to be here because this is the guy that's basically made his career what it is. But Drew Brees was a Pro Bowler before Sean Payton coached him, and he'll still be a great quarterback with him somewhere else.
Lastly, with the strains that this team has financially, is there any way that they can make themselves a viable candidate in the NFC in the next couple years?
Yeah, well, look, I think things can turn around pretty quickly. I think they can be competitive for a playoff spot as early as next year. I don't think they're that far away. I mean, they're not that far under 500, but to become a Super Bowl contender again like they were, I think that's a couple of years off. But I think the next likely step would be to try and contend maybe for a wild card spot and a winning record. I think that's doable.
Dennis Allen remains defensive coordinator.
Yes, there's no question about that. He's done a great job, I think, so far.
We'll be right back with Tuesday's Extra Point.
What's one of the nicest things that comes with your new Cadillac from Cadillac of New Orleans? 0% interest.
Get 0% interest on all new Cadillacs, now at Cadillac of New Orleans. New owners, new attitude, on Lime Street in Rye in Metairie.
Forgot to thank Mr. Duncan for joining us and being so candid. I know this is a tough thing for you to write that sort of thing. I mean, you're a New Orleanian now. You may not have been born here, but you're a New Orleanian through and through.
Well, I think we all want what's best for the Saints and Pelicans moving forward, and I think we all agree on that. Let's hope that there's some stability and some success in the future, and this thing isn't a long, protracted legal fight, which I fear might take place.
I think you're right. I don't think there's any way to get around it. For today's Extra Point, let's go back in time and run a short clip that promised things would get better after Tom Benson bought the Saints from John Mecum in May 1985. I'm not sure any of us realized just how much better they'd get, but those old enough to remember the team before Mr. Benson, well, we sure as hell know how bad it used to be.
I never have coached a team or play, so I don't want to start doing that now.
Benson, a native of New Orleans, brings to the team vast experience and great accomplishments in the business world.
And real estate and everything.
And looks forward to continuing that success as he launches a new era in Saints football.
The other thing is we got the #1 fans in the country. And I'm not kidding about that, #1 fans, and I'm going to promise you this, that we're going to have the #1 team, too.
That will wrap it up for today. We'll be back Wednesday with Larry Holder and our final sprinkling of pixie dust this season. See you tomorrow, everybody.